Hello, and welcome to Why Extracurriculars Are Essential, Not Extra. My name is Stacy Johnson, and I am the marketing coordinator here at the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Amy Shelton, Executive Director at CTY. Dr. Shelton holds a faculty appointment in the School of Education and has joint appointments at the School of Medicine and Kennedy School of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Shelton has also served on the University Steering Committee for the Science of Learning Institute. She is an advocate for bright students in every community and has dedicated her research to the design and delivery of innovative educational models and approaches that support the diverse community of advanced learners. Amy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm really excited to be here and to be able to talk a little bit about this whole notion of extracurricular activities, because I think there's sort of some common sense around it, but there's also some mythology that goes along with these. And so the chance to talk about it is always very exciting. I will say that this is not my direct area of research. However, what I'm going to present to you is our sort of learnings over time and really what does the literature out there say. So I've spent a great deal of time with the scientific literature, but also opinion pieces and other things related to how we deal with extracurricular activities. And I'm going to start off with the QR code that you see on the screen. For each of the polls that I'm going to do, there's a little QR code. The one that's on the screen now is the same one that's on the next slide. And I want to do these. These are all anonymous, but they're a chance to kind of think about how people are thinking about extracurricular activities. And also we're going to use it as sort of springboards for some of this mythology and reality that's out there. So if you could take just a moment and answer the question, what does the term extracurricular mean to you? And so we're seeing some good answers popping up. Vital opportunities, academic enrichment, school activity, clubs, K-12 setting, addition. Yeah, seeing lots of great answers. I'll give people another minute or so. Happens outside, yep. Things outside of school is a very common answer. Excellent. So I think we're kind of all in the same vein on this one. And I am going to keep moving sometimes. So if there are times when you don't get a chance to do a response, please don't fret about it. I just want to kind of get it, like, so a lot of this is pulse checking. So let's talk about the term extracurricular, because it actually means a lot of things. And you're welcome to continue to respond. The poll will remain open throughout the entire talk. So if we think about it, oops, it's not letting me advance. Let me keep moving. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about what the definition of extracurricular actually is. There are actually a lot of different versions of it. If you work in school districts, you're frequently spending time on the defense of sort of specific sets of activities associated with the school. I actually spent a lot of my time, both as a teenager and then later on as part of my career, helping districts actually make arguments for their extracurricular activities. But the actual definition here is quite simple. Extra means beyond, and curricular in this case means curriculum, but we tend to think of it as the standard curriculum. And so we're going to use this term in the broadest sense today to mean really what are the things that are beyond the standard curriculum. So that will include courses still. So you can imagine this still being in-school courses and activities. So courses that are not part of the standard math, science, English, social studies, physical education, but things like theater class or art class or robotics class, things that are beyond the sort of typical classrooms. Many schools now have environmental science and things like that you can take that are not necessarily part of the standard core curriculum. It's also academic activities that build upon the coursework. These can be things like CTY, an out-of-school activity that is building on the academics. It can be things that are after-school clubs and competitions. So we'll talk more about sort of the range of those later on. But there are also activities that are beyond the academics. So that whole range is what we're going to talk about today in terms of the power of the extracurricular activities and what they mean. And the way I'm going to break it down is I'm going to talk in three segments. I'm going to briefly talk about the very practical question of college admissions, because I know that for many parents and educators, that is something we tend to think about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we know there. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on just the important relationships between extracurricular activities and different things that are sort of factors in success. And then we'll end by talking a little bit about just some sort of common sense and practicality around choosing experiences. So I'm going to start with this practical question of college admissions, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to highlight a question. So we're going to start with another poll. So again, use this QR code. It is anonymous, and answer this just a single question here. So true or false, college admission committees value extracurricular activities? All right, we'll give people another second. We're getting quite a few responses in there. Excellent. So yeah, the answer here is mostly true, right? So and I'm going to say that they do, but it may not be for all of the reasons that we tend to think that they do. So let's talk a little bit just briefly about what we mean by college admissions values extracurricular activities, starting with the idea that what it does for you is not it gives you something beyond the requirements. So the what you see in the literature and in advice from college counselors is that what extracurricular activities bring to the table is they help to demonstrate things like time management and responsibility. They are often opportunities to highlight leadership, and leadership in many forms, not necessarily having to be the head of something, but showing ways that you're taking leadership in communities and among peers in other ways. It's a place where there's more opportunity to show creativity than perhaps in some of the standard curriculum. But very generally, the rationale for college admissions to look at extracurricular activities is that many of the applicants will already have the grades and the test scores that make them competitive. And there's a whole range of viewpoints on how that is evolving over time and what it means to have good grades and good test scores. They really are looking for a range of students that have other things as well. But what we learned from looking at literature is that what extracurricular activities can do is kind of give the student personality. They can show sort of who this student is beyond being one of the many that might have the strong grades and strong test scores. It influences things like the recommendation letters, but also sort of the story of the student. And it gives the sense of the applicant as a unique individual. So that's sort of the baseline for saying that, yes, these are important things. But I want to move on and ask another question. So again, if you could scan that QR code. And true or false, more is better when it comes to extracurricular activities. Say extracurricular many times, it gets to be a tough word to say. All right, so we're seeing some. So this is a great set of responses because this is just about right. It's true, but it's also got, it's false, but it's also got some elements of truth to it. So let's talk about what that means. So when we talk about how much or what kind, there's this sort of notion out there, and you hear a lot of college counselors and college admissions officers talk about the problem or the myth around laundry lists, or what they call the well-rounded myth. And so I want to clean that up a little bit for you. Well-rounded is actually generally has a positive connotation. However, there's been some challenges to that definition. So you'll now hear things about, oh, well-rounded is not the goal. Well, some of that has to do with the way you're talking about well-rounded. By definition, historically, well-rounded really did mean having a variety of experiences, but not necessarily in the same sense of sort of a laundry list. But it was really more about how your experience in life could give you a more fully developed personality, back to that understanding who the individual is. In the what I call the college admissions lore world, it's come to mean do a little of everything, meaning that sort of laundry list idea, that idea that this checklist that I have to have been in student government, and I have to have done a sport, and I have to have played an instrument, I have to have done those things. That is where this well-rounded challenge has come in the college admissions world. And so if you look at advice from college admissions counselors, including many things that are available online, I have a QR code to just one of the many references where you can see sort of a perspective on this. But what you find out is that in this latter definition of do a little of everything, there's this fear among admissions officers that you're getting a jack of all trades and a master of none, meaning you're getting that sort of that cliche of someone who has done a whole lot of things, but has no particular area or areas in which they've really been able to become deeper and more thoughtful. And what we've learned that colleges seem to want to see is a student that can specialize. And I use can there for a specific reason, because there are different opinions on what that actually means. But in general, if you look across the advice and you look at what's been found in the current literature and what's looking at the data from college admissions, is that they want to see that a student has some interests and that they're doing experiences that are driven by those interests. And I have a plural here, but that question about is more better, perhaps some variety is better. Doing everything is not necessarily what they're looking for. What they are looking for is deep investment to one or more areas. And because what that does, it demonstrates an ability to have commitment and to focus. It shows that there are times when a student is really sort of getting into something. We can talk about that as passions. We can talk about it as interests. It's that thing that's become engaging enough for me to keep doing it. So that's sort of this issue of well-rounded has come to mean a couple different things in our space. And it's not really about just showing the metrics. It's not just saying like, oh, this student has 10 extracurricular activities and this one has 3. You might have someone who has 3 or 4 that are really robust, someone else who has 5 or 6 that are all kind of nothings. And so it comes down to really, are they telling the story of the student? So I'm going to leave college admissions alone as a topic proper at this point, because everything else I'm going to talk about is really what is more authentically going to position a student for broader success, whether it's in academics or career or life. All of those things are important and come tied together in many ways. So we're going to talk about what those things are. And to talk about that, again, I'm going to give you another little chance to do a poll. So we've been digging into literature for a long time now, and we've looked at what kinds of things have been associated with participation in extracurricular activities. So give it a shot. Which of these many things, and there's, for those who are looking at the screen, when you look at the actual poll, there are more things. So be sure to scroll down and we'll take a look at these. We're seeing some number of people are endorsing each of these. Give people another second. So we're going to talk about each of these areas in turn, and really talk about what do we know from the literature. And I'm going to start with that extracurriculars and academics, because there's been this interesting tension that's gone back and forth over the years, particularly in the school district space, where people have said extracurriculars are distracting, extracurriculars are helpful, extracurriculars make a well-rounded student. Oh, college admissions isn't looking for that well-rounded student anymore. What is it we're supposed to do? As I said earlier, I've spent some of my time, both when I was a student, but also as a professional in education, helping look at how you can actually make the case, and should you make the case for these? And the answer is you probably should. And I say probably for several reasons. First is there are several correlational studies that support a connection between participating in extracurricular activities and academic outcomes. Now, I've got an infographic here, one of many. This is actually an infographic using data from the National Center for Education Statistics, and I've given you the the space where this comes from. I grabbed this one. There are many of these out there. But what we do see is that there are metrics on which students who are participating in extracurriculars do seem to show stronger, are more commonly showing an outcome than those who do not. It's not always huge. It's not always universal, but it does happen. Now, when you actually dig into the data, you look at the research, it does vary sometimes by activity. So in some studies, doing more of an academic club has more of an impact than, say, doing performing arts or sports. But overall, you can find studies across the board where there doesn't seem to be a detriment. And in most cases, there are some positive outcomes in the academic space. And they can either be direct outcomes like GPA, they can be more indirect outcomes like attendance. So there's a whole range of things. But it does seem to be the case that these correlational studies do show this connection. And it does go beyond the academically based activities. So as I said, it does vary by type of activity, but it's important to note that there are many activities that are not really considered directly academic, but where they are actually bolstering many of these outcomes. One of the things that's not captured in the infographic is that there is some purpose to longevity, meaning that it's not just straight up, I've been in one or more extracurricular activities, but actually, how long did I spend in them? Have I committed to them? So that commitment, which we mentioned already in the college admissions piece, also comes into play when you look at outcomes. Some length of commitment to an activity is important for seeing these outcomes happen. Now, I do want to caveat to this, which is, as I note, these are correlational. And for those who are less familiar with sort of the research terms there, this does not mean that there's a causal relationship, mean that a good student may gravitate to more activities than a student who is weaker. That's possible. Given the type of data that we're able to look at, we don't know the answer to that. But there's been a lot of work on these relationships and on trying to model it out. What would a causal relationship actually look like that suggests the story is generally positive? It is certainly not the case that being in extracurricular activities or doing extracurricular activities has been shown to have harm in a lot of cases. The exception to that being potentially overloading students, but even some of the data on overscheduling and such, it's really nuanced by the type of student and the type of activity. So there's generally a very positive story here on the academics. If we move now to life skills, I noticed many people were endorsing life skills as something that extracurricular activities are good at reinforcing. This has been shown quite a bit as well. So structured activities, which most extracurriculars have some structure to them. You're meeting in a time and a place, you're coming together around some common interest, goal, etc. They are practical learning spaces. And there's a lot of learning that goes on for interpersonal interaction and for things like management of priorities. And the research specifically has shown things like students who participated in these activities tend to show development of adaptive skills. And there's a whole range of these. I've grabbed just kind of a set of them, but it's adaptability to new situations. It's taking personal initiative. It's perseverance. Some people call this sort of like the collection of some of these as grit, being able to really stick to something and go after it. Curiosity. Leadership skills, and that's a broad category. It does not necessarily mean being the head of something, but leading as a citizen, leading as an individual, and also just social awareness. So it seems to be that getting into these activities can give a boost in these areas. And some of this work has been, again, correlational. Other has been watching the change over time when someone has, when students have entered into these spaces. It's also been shown to help with motivation and self-regulation. These are also really important skills for long-term success in academic and career. And it does seem to be the case that students who are in these activities learn some of those skills as they go. Time management is a big one, and one that, especially in adolescence, many students struggle with. Having to actually manage that in a space that is not specifically just your coursework has been shown to be improved by having these opportunities. They also learn to cut out, like how to prioritize. That's part of time management. There's also been some data showing that they improve on their risk behavior management. So when you look at risk-taking behaviors, which can be very maladaptive, you see that there's a better balance among students who are taking extracurricular activities. They are learning to reduce the sort of dangerous risk and learning to take chances on things in a positive way, meaning that there's some risk-taking behaviors that are some risk taking is a natural part of what we do, right? Educated risk taking. But risky behaviors in adolescence are something we work really hard to understand. It turns out that among students who participate in extracurricular activities, they're a little bit better at managing those things. Now, these relationships are affected by other factors, meaning that they're not standalones. Every student who gets into an activity isn't necessarily going to see all these benefits, but the benefits are there. And when you look across many of the studies, there does seem to be this learning that goes on. Another related area, which is one near and dear to me because I have a background as a neuroscientist as well, is extracurricular activities in brain health. We have known for a very long time that an active lifestyle has known benefits to brain health throughout the lifespan. So whether it's physical, social, or cognitive activities, being active matters. And some of the strongest, most concrete data we have on brain health is that physical exercise is one of the strongest protective factors as we age. Meaning that if there's one thing you can do to keep your brain as healthy as possible, it's physical exercise of some sort. It also turns out that good habits in youth are what predict good habits later. So that's why when we think about this as a lifelong approach to better health and better brain health, getting those good habits early is helpful. On top of that, on top of this general knowledge that it's helpful, active lifestyle has been associated with positive cognitive and academic outcomes in children as well. So this is the work that has been used to make the case for keeping recess in the schedule, both as an outlet for students, but also to get that physical activity that keeps the brain going, helps with attention and many other things. And this is what we used in many cases to help make the case for these extracurricular activities too, because in addition to the physical health that comes along with physical activity, the social and cognitive activities are much stronger when you're in the extracurricular space than when you're in a typical classroom. So you can strengthen all of those things. So again, just really great from the basics of brain health, which we know brain health is one of the many components for long-term success. We also can see that there's a literature on sort of activities and well-being and sort of life satisfaction more generally. Personal well-being and satisfaction are actually known predictors of health and life success. They're not universal. There are unhappy and dissatisfied people who we might argue are successful in lots of ways. But when you look across at health and life success, you get a boost. But when there's high personal well-being and high satisfaction, now, these factors are not static. They develop and they fluctuate over time. So there's really great data showing that we tend to have sort of a higher satisfaction in youth. You see some growth of that in adolescence. There tends to be a dip at some point in early adulthood. It tends to come back for most people. But it turns out that adolescence is a key window for getting on a positive trajectory. And again, if you think about habit building starts early. It suggests that when we think about well-being and satisfaction, they are important. Well, it turns out that well-being and satisfaction are associated with several academic outcomes, such as attendance, grade, and achievement. And participation in extracurricular activities has been associated with adolescents showing greater general satisfaction and well-being, even during adolescence. Now, we all probably know about some of the brooding adolescents, but when you actually ask kids about their satisfaction in certain things and you break it down into different categories, on the whole, when they're able to participate in additional activities, you see that improvement. Again, like with all of these topics, there are other factors that are going to interact, but generally it's a positive story. So when it comes to this notion of college, career, and life success, which is really the way we think about it, like the whole person approach and how do you get there? We know that for a lot of the college and career success pieces, which are indicators typically of sort of that general satisfaction with what you're doing, not necessarily, you don't necessarily be the person who does X, Y, and Z, but are you satisfied and feeling successful in those spaces, do depend on multiple factors. And as a reminder that we're saying in this extracurricular space, it really is not about a laundry list of activities, but it's much more dependent on things like nurturing student interests, building life skills, and understanding that it's our experiences that shape our stories. If you were here for the previous webinar that we did on surprising factors, we talked a lot about building your authentic story. And this builds upon that as well. And it turns out that extracurricular activities are a structured way to kind of learn and grow into that space. So those are kind of the factors associated with this notion of success. I want to wrap up and move on to questions by talking a little bit about choosing experiences. And so again, I'm going to ask you to do a little word cloud for me. And if you could choose an extracurricular activity for your child right now, what would it be? And you can include ones that you're already, that they're doing. What do you think are sort of the most valuable extracurricular activities for your child? Getting any, it's not, either this one's not working or we're not getting responses.
Just checked it, Amy, and it is working, but I guess it's just not populating on your end. But some folks
Check
are
that.
putting answers in the Q&A.
Okay. Yeah, somehow it's not coming up for me. If I can reload it. Nope, it's not gonna let me reload. Okay. So this was going to be fun. We're going to talk about some of the different range. The point of this was going to is simply that there's a wide range of these, and we'll check back on that and see if for some reason it's not updating. But now it's not advancing. Okay. So there are a wide range of options when it comes to extracurricular activities. And in what I've talked about now, some of the studies are on different subsets of the space, but overall, you see this kind of similar picture. And I think many of these are already familiar to you. They are things like sports. That's actually one of the more common ones. One of the most common ones, and certainly the most common for the population we tend to serve at CTY, are the academic clubs and competitions. So things that really build upon the academics. We also see a lot of students doing things that are sort of like game or hobby type clubs and activities. Out of school academics, that is things like CTY, right? We are a place that does out of school academic activities wrapped in some of these other elements like keeping it social and building peer community. Performing arts, another one that, again, many of the studies actually do look at performing arts as well as visual arts. All of these fall into that category of ways to find out what a student is interested in, how to think about it. So how do you decide, or how do you help your child decide what the right kind of activity for them might be? And I'm going to actually go back to something that if you've been to previous webinars, at least the graphic should look familiar. The first goal is not, well, which of these has the highest relationship to success? There are some differences in terms of what affects which kinds of skills, but that's not really the place to start. The place to start is really about getting and staying engaged, meaning you want your child to get engaged and stay engaged in things that they enjoy. So there is no best activity or even set of activities that you would say all students should do this. All students should make sure they've done X, Y, and Z. That's that laundry list or checklist idea again. It's like school. When we think about schools, it's really about matching a student to the right place for them. Schools come in a wide variety. Students come in a wide variety. Same thing with activities. You really want to think about where are their strengths, where are their weaknesses, what do they enjoy, and also help them find those things. It turns out the reason this is so important is that those benefits that we've mentioned, those things that are associated with extracurricular activities and this staying active, those benefits will be reduced if the interest is not there. You can take a student and put them in an activity, but if they're not interested and engaged, they're not going to get the same kind of learning and benefit from it. And there's no magic number to how many is right. So we ask the question, is more better? Not necessarily. It really is about trying new things. It's a great way to discover passions. So sometimes you will see that a student has done a lot of different things because they're trying to find which things engage them. But it really needs to be about that genuine interest, which is critical to having the longevity and to being able to really tell a story about it. I always joke that I played softball for way too many years and didn't enjoy it. Did like sports, but softball was not one that I enjoyed. But I played it for many years because my sister played. I would argue that the benefits of my interacting in that space were nowhere near what they were for some of the other sports that I enjoy and play. It's also about balancing the types of activities, satisfying that sort of engagement, but also managing the time. So there are points at which, there's just too much to do. And this can be a real challenge for parents who have kids who are interested in many different things. If you got a student that's really engaged in one real big passion that they can follow, you can often sort of manage that a little more clearly. But when you've got someone who's either exploring the space or has multiple interests, finding a way to balance that is really important. So that how many is not as critical. Again, this comes back to there's not some checkbox that we know of where people are saying, oh, if you do 3, then you get this benefit, or you do 5, you get this benefit, whether we're talking about those skills or even back to the practical, the college admissions piece. There's no magic number. You really have to think about it on a student by student basis. And then there are some other factors to consider. And we've covered these in past webinars that are also available, but we're going to talk a little bit about them now. It can take trial and error to find the right fit. So sometimes you will engage in a lot of different activities to get there. Interests do evolve and change. I would ask you to think about, what did you want to be when you grew up? For some number of people, they'll say that they will have gone on the same trajectory that they've wanted their whole life. For most of us, I think it evolves and changes. Commitment and showing that you can show a commitment does not mean forever. When we say colleges want to see specialists, they don't always want to see that you're ready to specialize in exactly the thing that you're going to come and do. They want to know that you're the type of person who can be interested and can follow on an interest, and that you have one to sort of get you started at this point. But commitment doesn't mean forever. And in fact, while many people do, not everyone finds their calling in middle school or in high school or even in college, right? People change throughout their life. That's okay. The key is that we teach our children and our students to find those things that get them interested and keep them going. And they learn how to do that, sometimes serially. And sometimes, we do find students who find their calling early and keep going. It's also, we're in a world where you don't have to have a calling for your entire career. Many people make career changes, by choice as their interests evolve, even into adulthood. And it's also important to note that learning weaknesses is as important as knowing strengths. And along with that, it's just important to learn that you don't like something as it is to find passions and interests. So when we think about this space of extracurriculars, it's a space to be a little daring and try some things. Go for things that are of interest, be willing to let a child sample some of the space, really just figure out what's interesting to them and what they want to do. So with that, I have some take-home messages for you, and then one last poll if we can make it work. So extracurriculars really are part of developing a person, right? It's the things we do go beyond, I've been taught these things in school, I've learned these things in school. Even in the very best schools, the standard curriculum is still only part of what it takes to learn and become, sort of find your interest and become a person. Reminder that well-rounded has multiple meanings. I say yes to the authentically well-rounded, meaning experience the world around you and let that sort of build you as a person. And no to this long list of activities as the meaning of well-rounded. That's become the lore. That's become this thing like, there's this myth out there that you've got to have this long list. We're not hearing that from the counselors. The data are not bearing that out. So it's really much more about being well-rounded in the more authentic sense is what will be driven by getting into some of these things. Again, the benefits of extracurriculars go beyond basic academics. We see lots of benefit, again, from the physical exercise, from being creative, from having outlets for things. Do not dismiss the social side of extracurricular activities, being among other students who are interested in things outside the academic world or interested in these same academics but want to take it further. And engagement and discovery really are the critical features of this, meaning that you're really looking to develop and build and not check off a bunch of boxes to say I've done X, Y, and Z. And then finally, I always have to say this, and this is a message that I got many times as a parent over the years, is keep calm and enjoy this journey. You're already well on your way by just being interested in these kinds of events. Just being an engaged parent is known in the literature as a major factor in children being successful in lots of ways throughout their career and throughout their life. So if it'll work, we'll before doing Q&A, I'm curious about our audience. We'll see if it'd be unfortunate if this one doesn't work. But this is one where I want to hear what you are interested in as well. Because as parents, we sometimes forget that we need to model our behaviors. So if you could choose an extracurricular activity, what would it be? Stacy, give me a heads up if it's actually moving and not showing up on mine.
This one doesn't seem to be moving either. So everyone, as we sort of wrap up, please feel free to drop those responses into our Q&A there.
Okay, I wonder if Microsoft Forms is having a little glitch right now.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, so what this is meant to do is just encourage you to think about what you do outside of your day to day. What are the things that engage you and excite you, and model that for your kids. Model, we always say all these things that we do as advice for children are actually really great advice for us as adults as well, because we do get wrapped up in our world as well. And I'm always very curious about people's interests in activities beyond sort of the way we tend to present. We tend to present with kind of what we do more in our career space, but it's always fun to hear who we are as people as well. And with that, I will thank you so much for listening. And I know we're going to move to a Q&A, so I will turn that back over to Stacy.
Thank you so much, Amy. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.